Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie, and in today's video I will be answering, or more like reacting to, reflecting upon, if you will, the question of whether or not consumer action, individual action actually matters. One of the main criticisms of my channel is that I focus too much on individual action. My interest in sustainability came as a direct result of trying the zero waste movement for 1 month, and ever since then I just never stopped. I just kept reducing, I just kept reusing, I just kept refusing, I just kept recycling, I don't know. And one of the things I often see as a criticism of the zero waste movement and of what I do in general is the fact that it tends to focus too much on consumers rather than focusing on the framework and the structure which consumers live within. So today we're going to be discussing whether or not individual action actually matters. And I have reflections in both directions, so let's get started. But before we do so, this video is sponsored. This video is sponsored by Ruby Cup, my main girl, main squeeze. When it comes to reducing your personal waste, ditching disposable products is a really good step. A menstruating person can easily use over 11,000 period products in their lifetime, which is why I recommend reusable products like a menstrual cup or period underwear. And Ruby Cup has been my favorite choice for years. Ruby Cup also donates a cup to someone without access to safe period products and had currently donated more than 150,000 cups. Also during July, as part of Plastic Free July, Ruby Cup is giving away 1 free pair of period underwear whenever you buy a menstrual cup. I use both products, sometimes even simultaneously. And if you're interested about the use and how to do it and all the questions, I've left several guides down below that you're very free to check out. And you can also find the Ruby Cup website down below. Let's talk about individual impact. When we ask others, or ourselves for that matter, if our actions matter, I think it's really important to follow that question up with, well, who is affected by our actions? Because when we zoom in on who specifically is affected by what we do, it becomes a lot easier for our brains to understand rather than looking for a sign that our actions matter on a global scale. Because our brains are not actually meant to comprehend global impact. Our brains are certainly not meant to understand that what we do affects the rest of the world. Luckily, there's a lot of people that understand that what we do has a ripple effect throughout the rest of the planet, but many people don't. So this is just to say that this is definitely a spectrum, first of all, of how much you understand this. But it's also to say that if you don't understand this, or if you encounter someone that doesn't quite get it, it's not because they don't want to or because they're bad people. It's just to say that this is not something that's necessarily required to thrive in the world today. It's not something our brains are designed to do. And it's really hard to think that way if you're not used to it and if you've never been asked to think about that before. So we need to ask the question differently. To whom do our actions matter? That question is a lot easier to answer, but it's also a lot more interesting. Nothing we do happens in a vacuum. Everything we do creates a ripple effect. Of course, our actions affect ourselves. It also affects the people in our local communities, but more importantly, it also affects people in global supply chains. And it's important to talk about these people because especially in the West, we have a tendency of thinking about people that make our clothes, that produce the goods that we buy, that in every single sense of the word are the ones that make our consumption possible. We tend to talk about these people and think about these people as abstract notions, as less than, because we don't know them and they're very rarely talked about in our media. So we have to make these people real. They are real, but we have to make our brains understand that they're real. And we can do that by seeking out their stories, seeking out information about them, seeking out documentaries and reports that talk about the lives of these people. It's very hard to actually understand their struggles if we only think about them as abstract notions. But they're not. A lot of people are affected by our actions and our consumer patterns, and what we do matters tremendously to them. Like the sweatshop worker that's producing the clothes we toss when it goes out of style, or the farmers growing and harvesting the vegetables that we throw away, or the animals on our plates because we just can't live without bacon, or the mine workers looking for minerals for the phone that we'll replace in a year. And we can absolutely agree that when one person acts wastefully once in a while, nothing really happens. But you can be pretty sure that if you're comfortable with any kind of wasteful behavior, there are millions of consumers being just as comfortable doing it. It's very much the "it's only one straw" said 100,000 people. And I would actually love to talk about this logic some more, because when we talk about individual action, rest assured there will always be someone saying something in the lines of, well, the plane is taking off anyway, or, well, the steak is already there, the cow has already been slaughtered, so if I don't buy it, it's just gonna go to waste, and you don't want me to be wasteful now, do you? These are both real conversations that I've had with many people many times. And this is a brilliant way of, well, first and foremost, ignoring the fact that supply and demand is one of the great market forces. But I have a really hard time believing that this is actually something that we say in order to convince other people. I think most of all, we're trying to convince ourselves that it doesn't matter what we do because it's already there. I think most people are pretty aware that it's not that one plane that takes off or that one steak that tips the scale and destroys the world. But when we buy something, we create demand for more. And that's kind of the problem. Meat is the greatest example here. Because cows and pigs don't just appear out of nowhere conveniently. We breed them into existence only for them to be slaughtered. Animals in animal agriculture, cows, pigs, chickens, etc., don't naturally create more cows, pigs, and chickens. We breed them. We inseminate them artificially. So if it wasn't for human intervention, there wouldn't be this amount of animals. We would see loads of different animals, and not these ones specifically. And when consumers increase the consumption of meat, well, then the corporations responsible for supplying that demand will breed more animals to produce more meat. And when consumers buy less meat, then the corporations will try to do basically anything in order to get consumers to buy more products, even if that means changing the product entirely. And that's why we're seeing meat and dairy companies launching plant-based alternatives. And it's absolutely clear at this point that a lot of these meat suppliers are absolutely shitting their pants. Plant-based products is what sells. You rest assured these companies will start supplying it. And how can I say that with such certainty? Well, because it's already happening. Today, 16% of the global milk market consists of plant-based milk. Almond, soy, oat, pea, what else you got? And according to Mintel, the plant-based market has grown with 302% between 2018 and 2022. And this is all because of consumer demand. There's really no way of getting around the fact that plant-based products are often, at least when we look at substitutes, more expensive than meat and dairy. Because the meat and dairy industry receives around 25 times more support and tax subsidies than plant-based products. So this development is purely because consumers are wanting it to happen. You can also look at this from a self-centered perspective. And I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory way. Simply that what we do and how we consume and how our consumer patterns are also deeply affects our relationship with the world and our relationship with ourselves. Like repairing or maintaining clothes will save you a lot of money, or eating whole food plant-based products like beans, lentils, and peas is a lot cheaper than buying meat and dairy. Second-hand items also tend to be a lot cheaper. And being more circular in your thinking, like using the leftovers from your kitchen as compost that you can then use to fertilize your plants, makes your plants thrive so you don't have to buy synthetic fertilizers, and you also don't need to replace your plants once they die, because they won't die. They'll have a good time. Being more sustainable overall simply just means using less resources and using them in more conscious, mindful ways. And that goes hand in hand with saving money. A lot of sustainability actions also comes from impoverished communities. When we think about zero waste and sustainable living today, a lot of companies are making bank on trying to sell us a lot of different sustainable swaps. And while some of them are super practical, a lot of them are also unnecessary. And over time, it has come to mean that we just see this sort of green capitalism where some companies are making a huge profit off of selling us sustainability. But we can't buy our way out of the climate crisis. And at its very core, sustainability is about saving, it's about reducing, it's about using less, it's about not over-consuming. And that all comes with the personal benefit of saving money. Strangely, when we go out of our way to save resources because we want to save money, because we want to be more economical, it's applauded. Saving money is always applauded, but when you do the exact same things because you want to be mindful and sustainable, people often don't have the same reaction. Then suddenly our actions don't matter. How does that make sense? So something to think about is the fact that your actions also affect you. Here are some of the personal benefits that I've experienced from individual action. According to my bills, I use around 35% less water, energy, and heat than other people in my neighborhood, which personally saves me money, which I think is great, but it also saves resources. I am less affected by trends, both when it comes to clothing, foods, other kinds of stuff. I'm online, so I assume that I am just as exposed to micro trends and hyper focus on specific styles as most people. I get a lot of fashion content, and with that you get a lot of the micro trends, but I can acknowledge that something looks good on other people. I can acknowledge that something looks cute without the craving of getting it myself. Because I haven't bought fast fashion for almost 10 years, sustainable fashion has really given me the opportunity to explore my own style and what I personally like. So what is timeless to me? When that's the practice, when that's how you consume fashion, when that's your relationship to style, you're going to be less affected by what happens currently. It saves me tremendous amounts of money and also saves me the headache of feeling out of style. Because the fast fashion industry benefits tremendously from making consumers feel like they're not good enough. I spend less money on groceries than a lot of people that I know. Both because I use a local farmer's market, so I get a lot of seasonal and locally produced vegetables, which are amazing, but I also eat plant-based, and lentils and beans just cost a lot less than meat and dairy. If you rely on plant-based whole foods and not meat substitutes all the time, a plant-based diet is definitely going to be cheaper. Additionally, having good routines to reduce food waste also means that I will use everything that I buy instead of wasting money buying something I'm not gonna eat. I basically buy everything, including my appliances and electronics, secondhand. And the great thing about that is I avoid supporting companies that I so thoroughly dislike. Meanwhile, it also ends up costing a lot less money. And because everything I buy is secondhand, I often end up being a lot more intentional with what I bring into my home, and everything I own is something that thoroughly makes me happy. I won't be able to replace it again with an identical thing. I won't be able to go into a store and then just repurchase what was broken. Living more sustainably has also meant that I've developed skills that I otherwise wouldn't have. Even basic skills like mending and sewing, different kinds of cooking techniques that I wouldn't have learned if it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to reduce my impact. I've also learned woodworking, woodcutting, and leatherwork, all skills I wouldn't have if it wasn't because of individual action. And lastly, walking the walk, actually taking action, taking part and doing something, changing something in your life, reducing high impact actions, products, foods, gives me hope and motivates me to keep moving. The motivation, the engagement is the number one thing that we need, both in our own lives, but also to keep up the work, to keep the industries, the political sector to a certain standard. Actually taking action is the best cure against hopelessness. Now this is where it gets tricky. Acknowledging that what consumers do matter, personally, locally, and globally. What consumers do has impact, but the conversation about individual action and consumer impact often leaves a lot to be desired. Individual action has been a tool used by corporations and politicians to distract consumers for decades. Probably to keep consumers busy judging each other rather than looking at the fossil fuel sector as the main climate villain. And now we're sort of going back to the brain, because it's a lot easier to be angry with your neighbor for buying a new car or for not recycling than it is to be angry with the industry that encourages, benefits, and makes possible the wasteful behavior to begin with. And I think it's very important to be aware of this when we're talking about individual action. Because while we talk about what consumers are doing, we should also be looking to set a higher bar for what the industries are doing and what the political sector is doing. Those are not gonna walk free just because that we're now not using straws, am I right? It's first when we combine the efforts of consumers, of industries, and the political sector that we will actually get somewhere. Nothing we do ever happens in a vacuum. And even though it feels like process is going immensely slow and that sometimes our politicians are taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, our actions still matter. When you choose to change something in your life, and they can even be the smallest action, you can change your entire outlook on environmentalism altogether. Because you start to see the world in a different way. You start to see your place and your role and your importance in a different way. Just following the status quo because you don't think that you actually have any impact, because you don't think you can change anything, is such a downward spiral. But growing something, repairing something, creating something, reusing something, protecting something, and contributing to your local community, that'll keep you sane. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or tips, leave them down below. I would love to hear you guys out. You can share with the group. And if you like this video, you can like it. That would make my day. Or subscribe to my channel, which would also make my day. Thank you so much for watching. Have an incredible day, and I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!